The silent room, a haunting return. The rain poured relentlessly against the windows as Ava pulled into the long, winding driveway of her family's old estate. The house stood isolated, wrapped in fog, its Victorian architecture casting jagged shadows in the dim light. She hadn't been back in years, not since her parents passed, but tonight she needed a place to stay. Stepping inside, Ava was greeted by the musty smell of old wood and forgotten memories. The house was still, save for the occasional groan of the floorboards under her boots. She switched on the antique chandelier in the foyer, its dim bulbs barely illuminating the sprawling space. Her eyes drifted to the grand staircase, which led to the second floor. There, at the end of the hall, was the silent room, a place her family never spoke of and never entered. As a child, Ava had asked her mother why the room was locked, why it was so quiet. Her mother only said, "It's better that way." Ava shook off the unease that prickled her skin. She was an adult now, not a frightened little girl. It was just a room, nothing more. Later that evening, Ava settled in the living room with a blanket and a cup of tea. The rain outside grew heavier, and the wind howled through the cracks in the old windows. She had brought her mother's journals to read, hoping to feel closer to her. Flipping through the pages, she found scattered mentions of the silent room. Do not go near it. The whispers grow louder at night. It is watching. Ava frowned. Her mother had always been practical, not one for superstition, but these entries seemed frantic, almost unhinged. She felt a chill run down her spine but shook her head. It was just the storm playing tricks on her nerves. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed through the house. Ava froze, her tea sloshing in its cup. The sound came again slow, deliberate, and heavy. It was coming from upstairs. From the silent room. Ava's heart pounded as she climbed the staircase, flashlight in hand. The air grew colder with each step, the shadows longer. The hallway stretched before her, and at the end of it, the door to the silent room stood slightly ajar. That door had always been locked. Her breath hitched. Logic told her it was just the wind. The house was old, full of drafts. But something deeper, the same feeling that had kept her away for years, told her it was something else. Ava pushed the door open. The room was empty, its walls lined with faded wallpaper. Dust motes floated in the air, visible in the thin beam of her flashlight. A single chair sat in the center of the room, facing the corner. The silence was oppressive, thick enough to muffle her breathing. As she stepped inside, the door creaked and swung shut behind her. Ava spun around, her flashlight shaking in her hands. She turned back to the chair and froze. It was no longer empty. A figure sat hunched over, its back to her. It wore tattered clothing, and its thin, bony frame seemed to tremble with each shallow breath. Ava's instincts screamed at her to leave, but her legs refused to move. "Hello?" she stammered. Her voice sounded small, swallowed by the silence. The figure didn't respond. Slowly it began to turn, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were a marionette pulled by invisible strings. When it faced her, Ava felt her stomach drop. Its face was a void, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin. And yet she could feel it watching her, peering deep into her soul. Ava stumbled backward, hitting the door. She twisted the knob frantically, but it wouldn't budge. Behind her, the figure stood, its head tilting to one side as if curious. The silence was deafening now, pressing against her ears, her mind. The figure raised a hand and pointed at her, and for the first time a sound filled the room. A whisper. It was faint, like wind through trees, but it grew louder, sharper, until it was a cacophony of voices. They screamed her name, accusations, demands, threats. "Why did you come back? You were supposed to stay away. You'll never leave now." Ava covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. The figure stepped closer, its featureless face inches from hers. Then suddenly the door burst open. The whispers stopped. The figure was gone. Ava stumbled out of the room, slamming the door shut behind her. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air, her mind reeling. She grabbed her things and fled the house, leaving it and its horrors behind. She vowed never to return. Months later, the house was sold to a young couple. As they toured the property, the wife paused in the hallway. "What's in that room?" she asked, pointing to the door at the end. The realtor hesitated. "Oh, that one? It's been sealed off for years, the previous owner insisted." The wife frowned. "We could use the extra space, maybe we'll open it." The realtor forced a smile. "If you're sure." As the couple walked away, the wife thought she heard something faint, a whisper coming from the other side of the door. It said, "Welcome."